Welcome. Welcome everyone to an interview and a discussion with our two 2020 Alumni Achievement Award recipients. We are so thrilled to be here with our award recipients this evening, and simultaneously we are sorry that we are not with you in person. But that day will come when we can celebrate in person. Joan Wallace Benjamin, Darby Dyer, and Kimberly Dozier, I cannot tell you how pleased we are to have this opportunity to speak with the three of you. As the 2020 recipients of Wellesley College's Alumni Achievement Award, you have joined a very distinct group of Wellesley alumni whose accomplishments hold the highest esteem. Each of you embodies our mission in the difference you've made and continue to make in the world. For more than a half century, the Alumni Association has recognized the outstanding accomplishments of alumni who have brought particular honor to themselves and to Wellesley through demonstrated excellence in their chosen fields. The Alumni Achievement Awards is the highest honor the college bestows. Each year, we marvel at and celebrate the enormous talent, drive, and dedication of the Alumni Achievement Award recipients. No matter the path they pursue, each recipient of this award is guided by what we most value in a Wellesley liberal arts education: the transformative power of curiosity, the pursuit of ideas through fact-based inquiry and critical thinking, and the drive to make the world a more just and equitable place. This is the unique gift of a women's education, of a Wellesley education. It's also a testament to the power of a liberal arts education. Many of the past recipients of this award are pathbreakers who overcame untold challenges and paved the way for the Wellesley graduates who followed them. They serve as a guiding light for today's students. By honoring these extraordinary women, we are also honoring a legacy of support and leadership that stretches across decades and demonstrates that Wellesley is a singular place, a community where young women can explore and learn without constraint, gain confidence, resilience, and independence, and go on to make a difference in the world. Joan, Darby, and Kimberly, we are so proud that you are taking your rightful place in this group of luminaries, and it's wonderful to be here with you. You know, just to begin with, so often when our students see the successes that each of you has had, it may seem as though it's been a straight line from Wellesley to where you are today. We know that for most of us, that is just not the case. So we'd love to hear from each of you how you chose your specific fields. Joan, I'm going to start with you. You embarked on your leadership journey while you were here at Wellesley and served in college government. Can you tell us a little bit about your path from being a psychology major at Wellesley and how that evolved to a multi-decade career in nonprofit leadership and public service, and how Wellesley helped shape your path?
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. Wellesley College government was great. It was a wonderful experience. I was the junior vice president for on-campus affairs, which was responsible for the activities and use of the then student Schneider Center, which was the student center. At that time, I think I tested my organizational and planning skills. But when I arrived at Wellesley, I was completely open to everything. I didn't know what I wanted to study, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents had always encouraged me to do everything on campus, to take advantage of everything that a liberal arts a college like Wellesley had to offer. So I was open, and I moved around quite a bit, trying different things. I did know, however, that whatever I did after Wellesley, it would be work contributing to the African American community and other communities of color. As a baby boomer, a civil rights beneficiary, from my earliest days at Wellesley, I felt compelled actually to give back to the Black community that made it possible for me and thousands of others like me to attend a college like Wellesley. It seemed then, actually, that the study of psychology was a good foundation for working in the human services sector. I most love child psychology and the courses there, and those are the courses in which I got my very first A's at Wellesley, so I really did like them. I left Wellesley to attend graduate school at Brandeis University in a PhD program on a fellowship in mental retardation, in which my contribution to that literature was to look at the attitudes and expectations of Black mothers who had given birth to a moderately retarded child. The first dissertation topic of its kind, actually, at Brandeis. When I graduated, I began working in the nonprofit sector, in organizations serving children and families. Boston's Head Start program, the Boys and Girls Clubs of Boston, the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, the Home for Little Wanderers. All of those organizations had missions that supported the educational, economic development, mental and behavioral health of children and their families. And I worked for 35 years in the sector, with just 2 short detours into the private sector and into government as Deval Patrick's chief of staff. So it was not completely a straight line from Wellesley to the world of work, but I think it was one in which my Wellesley experience clearly was a big key.
Thanks, Joan. And there's clearly a really powerful through line, across all of your leadership roles. It's a very powerful story. Darby, I'm going to turn to you. While I know you were a double major in geology and art at Wellesley, I think we'd love to hear more about your path to becoming a professor and now chair of the Department of Astronomy at Mount Holyoke and a lead investigator. What motivated you? And tell us a little bit about how Wellesley shaped your path.
Something about the fact that I'm the chair of the astronomy department and I never took an astronomy course in my life should tell you that my path has not been straight. Let's see, when I was a student, first of all, I got to say, Joan, I'm honored to be in the same award with you. What you've done is amazing. When I was a student, I think I came into Wellesley like everyone. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the top at whatever my chosen field was. I was convinced that I could do that. And I spent 17 years trying to get tenure at somewhere, and eventually somewhere along the line, my goals changed. And maybe this happens to a lot of women, where you go from a mode that's sort of taking care of yourself and wanting to be personally the best to wanting to make sure that the next generation can be the best. So I would say about 20 years ago, I had the epiphany that my career really didn't matter, and that really what was more important was making sure that other people could have the careers that they wanted. So that was my motivation and continues to be my motivation. How did Wellesley change me? I think all the women in my family, and there are 7 of us who've gone to Wellesley, can all attest to the fact that Wellesley taught us how to fail. I personally failed a lot at Wellesley. I had not had a lot of experience with failure before I came to Wellesley, and I failed at everything. But somewhere along the line, I had a lot of people at Wellesley that picked me up every time I fell, and that was pretty profound for me. It taught me that having confidence in other people, and particularly the value of the weight of other people having confidence in you, could really make a difference. So I think Wellesley gave me the ability to realize that maybe I wasn't the best and the brightest, and I certainly wasn't at Wellesley, but that I had some kind of inner strength that I could learn to face obstacles and fail and then succeed eventually and figure out ways to make it happen. So that's how Wellesley shaped me.
Well, I mean, Darby, the resilience then that you developed, and it sounds to me that the modeling you had here at Wellesley with really outstanding mentors, people who did pick you up, who believed in you, that's something you followed and really carried on to the next
Oh
generation.
yeah, I'll never forget. I was failing my first chemistry class, and one of my geology professors offered to tutor me. So it really, even in those days, it was the village of Wellesley was picking me up and propelling me forward.
Yeah,
I'll never forget that.
it's terrific. Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you. And several years after graduating from Wellesley with majors in political anthropology and Spanish, you received Wellesley's Mary Elvira Stevens Traveling Fellowship to investigate Islamic fundamentalism. I can only imagine the experience. And, can you tell us more about how you chose journalism as your field? Again, what motivated you, and a bit about how Wellesley shaped your path.
Absolutely. Thank you. It is an honor to be here with all of you. To dive right in, because as a former broadcaster, I'm aware that we have just an hour to talk. That Mary Elvira Stevens Fellowship is the reason I was able to become a foreign correspondent, full stop. And my experiences at Wellesley were the reasons that I became a journalist. It started with being the news director at WZLY, when WZLY was still broadcast through a tower and only reached about a 2-mile radius. So AP, the Associated Press, wouldn't give us wire services because we weren't big enough. And I was basically rewriting the Boston Globe, because this was when the internet was at its infancy. I thought to myself, I want to be able to report with resources. So that was in the back of my head. At the same time, I was the head of the Latin American Concerns chapter and was trying to organize a group of students to go down to pick coffee in Nicaragua and marching against the Reagan administration. So I really got pulled, especially because of the reports of human rights abuses, in an ideological direction. Then I got an internship, as encouraged by my Wellesley academic counselor, at something called the Human Rights Internet. And again, this was before the internet. It was a conglomeration of all of the different UN-funded human rights agencies. So I ended up spending a lot of time cataloging their reports, but I also spent time translating Latin American torture documents from Spanish into English. I learned 2 things. It didn't matter if the government was left-wing or right-wing. Power corrupted. And each side of the ideological spectrum ended up enacting the same horrific abuses. So that made me pretty sanguine on my little marching escapades. And then the other thing was all of these human rights organizations, their big thing was, we've got to get a mention in the New York Times or in Reuters. We just need one paragraph in one of those news outlets to make our 1 year or 2 years of research at great risk of the researchers in the field and the people providing the information. And I looked at this and I thought, do I want to be the person spending the 2 years for that report that might just get shelved and like 3 people read it? Or do I want to be the reporter who's making sure that that report sees the light of day? And so the combination of that combined with the fellowship that got me to Cairo, Egypt, launched my career. And I have to say, the fellowship folks, when we went up for the interview as to who would get this fellowship, it was not supposed to be for career advancement. It was supposed to be to study Islamic fundamentalism. But in the middle of the final interview, one of the The ladies behind, the Star Chamber type table, looking at me, and behind them were the plate glass windows of the center, and there was a snowstorm coming in, so there were like cows blowing past the window behind these ladies. And one of them said to me, "You want to use this for career advancement to become a foreign correspondent, don't you?" And I was like, cows. Oh, yes. And I did not think I would get that fellowship. And so I flew all the way back down to Charlottesville, Virginia, to my unheated one room of a farmhouse that I was renting as I got through UVA. And there was a blinking light on the answering machine. We still had answering machines then. And one of the members of the fellowship committee said, "This is supposed to be to discover truth and beauty, so we've split it. A Wellesley College woman who is a painter is going to go to Germany and paint pictures of rivers, and you can go to Cairo with the other half." So thank you again, Wellesley. Back to you.
What a powerful story. And I would venture to say that there's beauty in truth. So you did do both. Darby, you had deep experiences, and I was so impressed in reading your bio as I learned that you had deep experience in art history at Wellesley, and that you even returned to Wellesley during your time at MIT as a graduate student to take art history courses. So tell us a little bit about how the humanities helped to shape your life.
Well, yeah, I got to tell a funny story. When I went to the registrar a couple of years ago to get my transcript, I got a phone call back saying, "Wait, you have 2 transcripts." I'm like, "Well, yes, I was there for 6 years." And then I had to explain to this person why it was that I had been at Wellesley for 6 years. I just couldn't stay away. But in some ways, that's linked to your question, because being a graduate student at MIT in the 1980s, when there weren't any other women around, I needed not only the company of women, but also I needed to use the other side of my brain. And so for me, going back to Wellesley, just that time on the bus, the time at the college, in that familiar environment, it was what got me through my PhD. I'll never forget the afternoon of my PhD thesis defense. I went out to lunch with my family, and then afterwards I got on the bus and went out to Wellesley because I didn't want to miss my last painting class. So, for me, I think one of the things about Wellesley that I learned in sort of in that continuum of time between Wellesley and MIT was that I have to have balance in my life. In order to be the most productive possible scientist, I also have to have other kinds of balance. And, like, I was never an athlete in high school or even when I got to Wellesley, but I had a roommate who went to the pool and swam every morning. And so, I don't know, starting in the second week of my freshman year, I got up at 6:45 every morning and went over to the pool and swam a mile. And then, as time went on and I studied art history and geology, I really kind of enjoyed the yin and the yang of art. There were days when I would go to openings at the art museum, and I'd always have to rush back and curl my hair and put on my monogram sweater, and I'd go stand around the art museum in my high heels and drink sherry and talk about sculpture. And then inevitably on the same day there was a kegger in the geology department, so I would leave the art history thing, run back to the room, put on my jeans and my hiking boots, and then, jog over to the geology reception where people were sitting around a keg. Let me add that the drinking age was 18 then, and just sort of hang out. So, for me, the humanities is just, I learned that is an important part of me. And if I don't depend on having some balance in my life, both the physical well-being part and also the sort of different sides of my brains, I can't be productive in any of my parts. So for me, it's all about the habit of balance that I started at Wellesley and I stay with it every day.
Well, I think the real power of a true liberal arts education, and again, I think a good message for our students, for their time here, even if they are deeply engaged in science, right? That really explore the other areas. And Joan, You did that, and Kimberly as well. And Joan and Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you because each of you has written a book reflecting on your lives and lessons learned. And Joan, your book, Leading a Life in Balance: Principles of Leadership from the Executive Suite to the Family Table. You address those principles that you really culled from your life. The book was recently published. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. Can you talk about these principles and again, how our students might learn from your lessons? And then Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you.
Absolutely. Darby, buy a book. It's about balance. And I just want everybody to know that our president, Paula, has written the foreword for my book.
It was my honor. It was my great honor.
Honored. Thank you. Well, throughout my career, most of my professional career, and most professional women struggle with balancing work and family. And I've actually been to Wellesley College on several occasions to talk to students about this topic. Throughout the years I was doing it, though, I was really not quite sure how to balance both. But when I retired, I decided to put it on paper, put on how I did it and how important balance is, both in the executive suite and at the family table. So my book talks about the lessons I learned over the 36 years of my career, how to take calculated risks, how to take a stand on things that are important to you, how to build and work with different kinds of people and build a positive workplace culture, stick to your principles at home and at work, be guided by who you are, teach your children the lessons they need to learn, focus on your family, adapt to succeed. There are 30 chapters of leadership principles built around stories that I tell you. But there are some major themes in the book that stand out for me, however. The first is, it's important to integrate how you grew up, what you believe in, the values you were taught by your family, the many experiences you had, into your style and approach to leadership. None of us can erase our history or our background, so don't. Just incorporate it into your leadership style and use it to enhance your leadership. 2, confidence is the fuel of development. If you think you can and you work hard, you will develop. The better you get, the more confident you become, the harder you work, the more successful you are. You want to live your life and your work in that zone, always building your confidence. And it's the kind of thing that you build over a lifetime. And there's a process that you can engage in to do that. The best leaders, I think, are whole people. They don't make a choice between their career and their family. They choose both with equal emphasis and importance. I love the Congolese saying that a single bracelet does not jingle. Leaders need family, friends, colleagues. The more leaders let themselves prioritize their life outside of work and give permission to others to do the same, the more effective your leadership will be. Pick your partner or your spouse carefully. They are an integral part of who you are and the success of the work that you do. And then when we're not with our families, we spend so many hours of our lives at work. It's so important to love what you do, to wake up each morning with a bounce in your step and inspired by the day ahead. If you don't like what you are doing, stop doing it and do something else. You can live in so many different careers over the course of a lifetime that you have to have work that has meaning and that makes you happy. And if it doesn't, change it.
Yeah. Thanks, Joan. And when you talk about multiple careers, I think that, I think you were a bit different, to be honest, for the generation, because most of us had one. You stayed in a particular field, and you really grew and shifted and made choices, which takes courage to do. And I think for our young women today, having multiple careers really is the norm, and to really, really grab onto that, to embrace it, and use it to figure out the path. So thank you for those words of wisdom. Kimberly, your book, Breathing the Fire, Fighting to Survive and Getting Back to the Fight. I love that title. It tells your story of both your passion for your work and also just the terrible tragedy that you experienced as a road bomb struck you and your team, and your road back. Can you share with our students a little bit about that journey and what they can learn regarding your fight back to that work that you love?
Thank you. Absolutely. And I have to say, I noticed that Nancy Davis has dropped a similar question in the chat asking about resilience. And I learned that resilience at Wellesley because it was hard to get there. It was hard to stay there. It was hard to graduate. I was a scholarship kid who had fights with my mom on the phone almost daily because she lived in such fear of, how were we going to pay the next installment? And I had brilliant grants from wonderful Wellesley alum who had contributed, but it was that tough. And worked about 3 jobs, and it was thanks to a Wellesley College counselor who allowed me to double up that I was able to graduate in 3 years and get my degree. But having to fight so hard for it, and then having people support me in that cause, the woman at the who used to keep an eye out for catering jobs for me on the weekend, where in that bulletin board where they used to have like Wellesley College or Wellesley, the town of Wellesley would ask for student workers. A lot of people helped me get through and made it possible when I was faced with a pretty impossible task. And the people I was supposed to be depending on, my parents, were really they were in fear and doing everything that they could. And later in my career, over and over, I got told I was either inexperienced or too old or the wrong this, the wrong that, when I was rather late in life. And to be in your 30s to make a switch from print reporting to broadcast reporting is actually late, to TV reporting. So every time someone told me somewhere along the way, you're wrong for this job, I learned I thought back to the lessons of what happened at Wellesley. Like, okay, what's the reality here? What's the part of the criticism that's right? And then what's the part that's their fear or whatever their personal baggage was projected onto me? And that was, it's a really humbling process. Yeah. But when our team was hit in 2006 and I lost my cameraman and my sound man, the Army captain we were following, and woke up in the hospital and was told they didn't know if I'd keep my legs. And I had to fight my way back to learning how to walk again. All of those lessons came back in ways that it was interesting. Both the psychologist who would stop by in the Bethesda Naval Hospital ward where they had all the combat injured, and thanks to the Bush administration, which at that time had been no friend of CBS News, but wow, they came forward to take care of me and my family. And there I was on that ward, and the psychologist who would stop by said, it's people like you with your level of experience and officers who I'm less worried about in terms of your recovery. because you have already learned how to fight for yourself. You ask the doctors the questions so that you understand what medicines to take. So your outcome is just going to be more likely to be better. So I guess my advice to all the students out there is, I know it really feels like you're going through hell, possibly now because of the virtual learning experience, possibly because you've started looking for jobs and you don't see an opportunity out there, or if it's a fellow alum on the line and you're wondering if you might be laid off, or you're redrafting your resume because you have been. All these horrible things will be something really powerful to draw on later. So thank you again, Wellesley.
Kimberly, it's such a powerful story. And I think, I'm reflecting on what each of you has said and just reflecting back on Darby's experience at Wellesley. And really, the others, we don't go through this life as just singular beings, right? We get here through others being with us, lifting us up, us lifting them up. And I think it's been a consistent theme through your lives. Darby, you work with students every day, and I must say I was moved to read that you're on sabbatical this year. You're working on an important proposal to explore Venus. I didn't know that Venus was a planet most like Earth, but it's really the missing of your students in this year, and you're wanting to get back to them. Just tell us about what students do. I mean, and maybe a little bit about your advice to students, but it seems like they lift you up as you lift them up.
Oh, absolutely. As at Wellesley, we just finished academic advising for the spring semester. And so, I had a half an hour Zoom meeting with each of my 20 advisees. And I hope that they didn't notice that when their little faces come on the screen, I get tears in my eyes. I miss these people. I care about each and every one of them so deeply. I have a real bond with my students, as I guess you can see. And I always try to, I do have it at the last class of every class I teach. I try to sort of have a discussion about life and my life as a scientist and what they aspire to. And so I have a sort of a 3-part advice that I give to students, which I will iterate in a shortened form. The first part is never take yourself too seriously. And people that know me know that I don't take myself too seriously. I take my science and my education extremely seriously. But as a scientist and as a geologist, I do really esoteric research, and it's not probably like what you do, Paula, where some discovery that you make might change the world overnight. My kind of discovery is, tiny bricks in a giant bridge, and eventually my little brick will make a difference. But it's really kind of almost a selfish thing to do the kind of academic research that I do, and that's common, I guess, in a lot of places in academia. On the other hand, the doing of the research is something that you share with students, and in sharing it with students, that kind of elevates what you do, because you're training the next generation who maybe will make more bricks than you have, and actually, really, really make a difference. So, I tell them, don't take yourself too seriously, but take what you do very seriously. The second thing I tell them is that, my personal philosophy is that everybody needs 2 sets of passions in their life. The first set of passions revolves around other people, the love you give to your family, the love I give to my students, the things I learn from my family and my students, and the richness of all of my friendships. Those are a really important passion and force in my life. But for me, happiness at the end of the day is about having a second passion as well, which is an intellectual one. And it's that personal thing that doesn't involve other people, but involves the thing that you can't stop thinking about when you go to bed at night, or you wake up in the morning and you're excited because you had a new idea about what you do. And so, my wish for my students is always that they find happiness and fulfillment in both of those areas and not just one of them. I think that's really important. And then the last thing I tell them is something that I wish I had learned at Wellesley. You know, in the 1970s, being at Wellesley was about being told that possibilities were limitless. And I'm sure my colleagues here can all appreciate that. But I think one of the things that my generation of women feels pretty deeply is that although we were told that the possibilities were limitless, we were never reminded that there would be consequences to aspiring to these things. And, you know, for modern women in the 2020s, I think there are fewer consequences for trying to follow your dreams. But, you know, many women in my generation, and I see questions in the chat also, you know, aspired to things and then got slapped around. And I wish I'd kind of had some warning about that. So I think that's something that is an important part of the dialogue. And I try to bring that into discussions with my students about, you know, what if you want to do A, but it's going to have B personal cost, and, you know, talk about those kinds of decisions in life. I think those are really important things for aspirational women to think about.
No, thank you. And those are just, it's such important words of wisdom. And, you know, I think, I always think about being here at Wellesley and you at Mount Holyoke. Our students are having really these extraordinary experiences with scientists like yourself. And I just want to say for the audience, you know, this is truly an extraordinary opportunity for our students to both learn in the classroom, but also in the lab with just stellar scientists who are making discoveries, and they're doing that with you, and that is truly a gift. So thank you.
Oh, and it's so much fun.
So I'm going to move to our last question before we turn to the audience questions, and there are a number of them. You know, this is truly just such a time of intense challenge, but also promise. And on the one hand, we have a pandemic that's highlighted very deep racial and economic inequalities in our society. And on the other hand, for the first time in the nation's history, we have a woman who's both Black and Indian American who's going to be our vice president. Last month, Americans turned out in record numbers, record-shattering numbers to vote. But as a whole, you know, I think that the election also really highlighted stark political and social divisions in the country that seem to be deepening. So, you know, at this time of both challenge and change, you know, what gives you hope? What sustains you? What drives you to live out Wellesley's motto, non ministrari sed ministrari, not to be served, but to serve? So why don't I start with you, Kimberly?
Well, what gives me hope partly is that turnout and the opportunity to teach a new generation of people to trust what at least part of the media has to say, and it's an opportunity for, I saw a lot of malaise out there. I would go overseas to places like Iraq and Afghanistan where people risked their lives to vote, lost their lives voting, would lose fingers that got dyed with the purple ink to prove that they voted, because then the Taliban or ISIS would track them down and torture them. And then I'd come back to the United States and people didn't seem to care. Well, we all got a wake-up call that this is what happens. Sadly, part of the wake-up call came for part of America under the Obama administration, and then the wake-up call for other folks came under the Trump administration. I am looking forward to the time when we can get past some of this tribalism and understand that we were designed by nature to disagree and debate these things out. And that is the point of the United States of America. And I hope that people trust my journalism and the team of people I report with, that we're trying to bring you clear-eyed information to show that process and to add to the understanding rather than to stir the hate.
Very important, and thank you. Thank you for bringing that news to us, right? We absolutely count on it. Joan, why don't I turn to you next?
So as the oldest one in this conversation this evening, and a child of the 60s, you know, the current racial and economic divisions, protests, the disproportionate impact of COVID, and all the health disparities, you know, among people of color have been with us for a really long time and for generations. And inequality has been ever present. I think the difference over the past 6 months, though, has been really that the entire nation, albeit the world, watched a Black man murdered on television in real time. The reaction to that by the American people was swift, emotional. People from all walks of life hit the streets. So throughout my life, I think having experienced all of that and watched it over the many years, I feel as though I have lived non-ministrari, sed ministrari, just in the work that I've done and the way I've raised my family, and it's just been part of who I am. But what gives me hope today is that there are many, many more Americans of all stripes and ages willing to join the fight. And I think that's encouraging. And the pictures on television during the protests were just unbelievable. Just the sheer numbers of people from every community across the country and in the world was really, really phenomenal. I think what sustains me is that there is a younger generation like our students that want to make a difference. They are smart and caring. They have technology and other skills second to none. And they've grown up, actually, and I would include my sons who are 37 and 32 in this group. They've grown up in a world much more diverse and inclusive than the one that I certainly did in the 50s and the 60s. So I think that sustains me. And I think that there's really hope there. And I hope, I think it should sustain us all. There are real possibilities into the future.
Absolutely. And Darby.
It's very hard to follow the two of them. But I will say, actually, when I saw this question, my first reaction was women's education, the education of women worldwide, and in particular, the small and what's the word I want? Fortunate subset of it in which we are engaged at Mount Holyoke and at Wellesley. The fact that women's education continues to persist and thrive gives me a tremendous amount of hope, and I'm so proud to continue to be a part of it. What else gives me hope? My children, the fact that both of them care deeply about the environment and bring that to bear in their careers, and that they step up. My daughter is tutoring high school students in Washington, D.C., and my son is playing trumpet at military funerals in California. My students, they have such bright faces and inspirational stories. As an example of the kind of inspiration I get out of these students, the first openly transgender student to graduate from Mount Holyoke was an astronomy major, very close to me. That individual is now in graduate school, and about a week ago, he sent me his first paper. And I just couldn't be more proud. And that gives me hope for this planet, knowing that the obstacles that he's overcome to get to this point really give me hope. What sustains me? What gets me up in the morning now is knowing that all of these younger people are watching me. They're watching me fail. They're watching me, work around the obstacles that I've had to do for my career. and watching to see what I'm going to do next, because they never quite can figure that out. So for me, in a weird way, serving the Wellesley model is about getting up every day and going to work and being who I am and what I am, and trying to make sure that students have a role model that is flawed, but tries hard, and that they too can be flawed and succeed. So that's what sustains me.
It's wonderful. Very powerful words to end this formal part on. And why don't we just turn to the questions, and there are not a number. The first one from Sandra Park. As more women are nominated for key leadership positions in the government, is there a clear pathway to heal the racial tensions that have divided the country? What key piece of advice would you give alums who would like to work on diversity and inclusion issues in the government? Joan, do you want to pop into that one first?
So actually, as I think about, I did some work in government, I think about government, I think some of the biggest challenges are not around gender in government. Because if you think about how to make changes in government, 55% of women voted in this last election for what certainly I would say was a set of untenable beliefs and policies and practices and treatment of people. So I think that women in government, if they want to participate in the diversity and inclusion conversation and to make change there, need to not just bring their gender with them, but their sensitivity and understanding of racial and ethnic and religious bias that plays in the workplaces across America, that plays in government as well. So I think women need to, those women that kind of think the other way, and that are open and liberal and want a nation and our government not to be one that is racist and biased, need to speak up in the workplace, both private and particularly in government.
Yeah, thanks, Joan. Anyone else? No.
I would just say, having watched my little sister struggle as a single mom with 3 kids, who got just about a full ride to Johns Hopkins for her master's, but then for her internships, she got poor marks because she'd explained her daughter was 6 and she couldn't make it till 10 a.m. every day because she had to walk her daughter to school. And this was an unpaid internship, so she couldn't pay for childcare, and yet they criticized her for it. We got to do something to make childcare more equitable so that women, families can have kids and not have it impact one side of the family more than another. So if some of the women in government can raise up that issue, that would go a long way.
Thanks, Kimberly. And I think, you know, the pandemic has brought that issue. It's always been an issue, but I think the pandemic has brought that issue front and center, you know, as whatever supports families have or women have, men, that as those collapsed, the fragility of the system that we've kind of cobbled together, which really isn't a system, was really kind of laid bare. So just absolutely. This is from Teta Banks. Can you share the kinds of barriers you faced in your careers? Racism, sexism, quote unquote, being aggressive. Anyone can pop in.
Oh, where to begin? You know, earlier in my career, I was referred to as that woman because, of course, I was the only woman, so I could always be that woman. You know, I faced it all. I was sexually harassed at 3 different institutions. I was the second woman faculty member ever hired at the University of Oregon. And one of the senior faculty members came after me when I'd been there for 2 weeks. I filed a complaint against him and found out that he had a history of harassing the undergraduate women in my department, and I was the first person in all those years to speak up. But because it was the 1970s, the only thing they did to him was put a letter in his file, and then they made him the chair of my tenure committee, and you can guess what happened. So that's the kind of thing that's happened to me in my career. And the sad thing is, I think that still happens. Science is still not the place that I wish it would be. And, at the time that happened to me, I had such great hopes that the situation would get better. And in some ways, it's sort of gone underground now. Discrimination is now an underground thing in academia, and particularly in the sciences. And I will probably stay in this career for several more years because I'm determined to make sure that I fight that as hard as I can before I retire. It's such a waste of years of my life that I spent having to worry about situations like that.
Yeah.
Just very sad. But hopefully it's changing.
Well, Darby, I mean, it's painful to hear your experience, but as you just said, unfortunately, so many women experience it. And, the report from the National Academies really pointed to the pervasiveness, but I think that there is change on the way. And part of that change is exactly what you're doing, which is getting more women into the fields, because we know that a more diverse workforce actually decreases the incident. It creates a different and more respectful environment. Another wonderful thing about being at women's colleges, where we have a much more gender balanced faculty.
Yeah, it was amazing to live through that 15% barrier. When the minority becomes more than 15%, suddenly you're not that woman anymore. And it's been wonderful in my career to at least live to see that go away.
Yeah. Joan or Kimberly, barriers you faced, racism, sexism? Go ahead.
I can jump in to foot stomp Darby's account. I've been sexually harassed by a boss who I was gonna report him, and I saw him doing something similar to another staffer, and I shared with her that I was going to officially report him, and she said, no, don't do that, because our big boss, who's a woman, said to somebody else who reported him, well, I had to deal with it, you have to learn how to deal with it too. And I basically just went home, cried, and then had my then husband come and sit next to me during all of my shifts, so that when this person showed up because he would show up in the studio where I worked and sit 2 feet from me and then reach past me and brush against me, and it was, yeah. So that was maybe a year of my life when I didn't sleep well, I couldn't eat much, and I felt trapped. And then I just basically when I realized I had no way out except through, I started doing these visualizations where I would visualize smashing my fist through his face. And every time I got to meet with him, I would tower over him and visualize that. And it's weird, sort of animal sort of projection. It changed the channel. But when I would go for jobs throughout broadcast, the other thing that I hope has stopped now, which is I call it the Highlander effect. There can be only one, where there was, because people were trying to be whatever the phrase for woke was 20 years ago, and have at least one woman in the ranks of you name it. As long as they had one, that was enough. So the women in said organization were pitted against each other to get that one spot. So instead of being able to support each other, which is what we really needed, see previous example of sexual harassment, instead we were at each other's throats. And that was, I really hope that that's passing away as a phenomenon. And the only way it's going to pass away is if you just got a lot, if you had a good mixture of people in every organization, as Darby said.
No, absolutely.
Can I add to the, so I had a slightly different experience because I haven't found throughout my career that my gender was the challenge. It was my race. And so I would walk into lots of rooms where there were very few women, and I was one of a few, but even fewer African Americans or other people of color. So I stood out in particular. And the impact of that wasn't really about my gender. It was about the second guessing related to my race. It was about attitudes around whether I was competent that was related to my race, whether or not I belonged there, or this setting was for me or not, but that was related to my race and not my gender. So that's been my struggle or my fight when I've walked into a room. Which I think does vary somewhat from the experiences that many white women have. And so I do think Black women and women of color have that other dimension, sort of that the management of the microaggressions and the impressions that people have about you simply because you are a person of color.
The intersectionality issues are really so important, and we're finally kind of really recognizing the importance of how we address those. I'm going to do we're running out of time, but I'm going to do a lightning round, and then we'll close, which is, I'm looking here to ask who asked the question. I'm not sure who asked the question, but somebody asked, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self? Quickly. Or 20-year-old, doesn't matter, 18 to 22.
I would say, hindsight being 2020, to my 18-year-old self is, the question of whether women can have it all.
Yeah.
And I would answer yes to that question. Women can have it all, but they cannot have it all at the same time. And so I look at my life, my work, my personal life, I have everything, if I ever made my big list, I have everything on my list that I ever wanted, as I thought about what my life would be. However, I'm 67 years old and I got it all, but I got it all by now.
Yeah.
So I would just say to my 18-year-old self, be patient, put one foot in front of the other. Think about the fact that if you had it all at 30, how dull would the rest of your life really be?
And I bet the definition changes a bit, right? What is all at 30 versus
all at 30 versus, that's right,
at more mature age? Kimberly, Darby.
Two things. First of all, I would tell myself, don't go to Schneider during your senior year every day and buy a half a pound of jelly beans so you can write your senior thesis. That would be one important thing. They used to sell bulk candy at Schneider. You guys probably remember that.
I worked in the
That was a bad move. It means that whenever I'm doing serious scholarship now, I still crave jelly beans to this day. I think the second thing I'd tell myself is become an art history professor. Looking back at my career, I've changed a lot of lives as a scientist, but the price I paid for it was very high. And I think if I had to do over again, I would have taken the slightly easier road for a woman and become an art historian.
Yeah. I love it. But I'm sure you would have become an art historian and a professor. So
yes, exactly. I would have ended up doing having the same effect, I hope.
Absolutely. Kimberly.
I would tell myself, worry less about what they think and figure out what you think. What is your internal compass? It took way too long to figure that one out.
Well, that's such a critically important one, right? To have the confidence and in kind of your own sense of self. And I think without a doubt, each and every one of you embodies that confidence. And we are so, again, proud of you. Just thank you, Darby, Joan, and Kimberly, for your insight, and for this really engaging conversation. Before we sign off, I do want to remark on the oak leaf pins that you're all wearing, the beautiful oak leaf pins. The oak leaf is an integral part of the Wellesley College tradition, and the oak leaf pin that's presented to each Alumni Achievement Award recipient symbolizes the strength, the quality, and the durability of the college and of our alumni. And the acorn, there's a little acorn on every pin, also reminds us of our own potential to turn our time at Wellesley into a life of purpose, meaning, and positive impact. And the three of you could not be more important and impressive models of what that means, turning a life to a life of purpose, meaning, and positive impact. We just take such enormous pride in your success. You inspire us all, and you inspire us to take that energy and purpose to our own pursuits, and for sure for our students. So thank you so much, and congratulations. And I look forward to having that dinner, that gathering in person.
Next year.
Next year. Have a wonderful rest of the evening. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations, everyone.
Thanks to all who watched.